Today, our program focuses on the unfortunate events that unfolded during the Holocaust of World War II between 1939 and 1945. The Holocaust was an operation by Nazi Germany to oppress and exterminate 6 million Jews, 2 million Polish Catholics, and 3 million Soviet POWs, among hundreds of thousands of Roma or Gypsies, political dissenters, and those with disabilities. Our guest speaker this afternoon is Meroslava Bryn. Meroslava Bryn was born in Ukraine in 1942. During World War II, she, along with her parents and other innocents, endured terrors of a Nazi slave labor camp in Germany. After liberation, recuperating from tuberculosis and living in a displaced persons camp, she and her family immigrated to the United States and ultimately settled here in Minnesota. There, she flourished as a proud young American citizen with a passion for education. Over the course of her distinguished 35-year teaching career, she taught over 2,000 students, both young and old, the joys of reading and believing in themselves. Realizing that history could be repeated if it was forgotten, she has embarked on a new career of speaking about her own experiences during World War II and beyond. Mrs. Bryn is not Jewish, but is Ukrainian Orthodox. Her experience gives us a view of the often overlooked Christian victims' experiences in the Holocaust. She is also the published author of a book, My Journey from Slave Labor Camp to Sanctuary. An old African proverb states that every time an elderly person dies, it is as if a library was burned down. I believe that this is very true, and we are all very blessed here to have Mrs. Bryn with us here today to share her experience in person. I would like to now introduce our guest speaker, Meroslava Bryn, to share her story with us. If you could help me welcome her with a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thank you, Joshua. That was a very nice welcoming and making me feel a part of the group, so thank you. Nina, help me, help me. The Nazis are here. They've come to round up all the Jews. This is how my mother, Nina, began her story about her best friend, Masha. Masha and her family in the early days of World War II, we were the best of friends. My mother and Masha grew up as little girls. When they were in kindergarten, they would hold hands, walk to school. Maybe some of this will bring memories to some of you, because the older ones, you were once little and you went to kindergarten. And as they grew, with time, they would sit and comb each other's long, beautiful brown hair and braid it and giggle and talk. And as they got even older, they whispered about boys, and then they would laugh and laugh, just like girls would do. And so, as they become young women, they each got married and had a family of their own. And my mother and Masha still were the best of friends to the very end. In the dictionary, the word Holocaust is described as a Nazi systematic torture and extermination of millions of European Jews, intellectuals, Slavic people, homosexuals, and political dissidents during World War II. If you did not experience it yourself, then these are just words in a book. But you could never truly believe that these atrocities actually happened. They did happen. I experienced it, I survived it. This is my story and my family's story. I was born December 7, 1942. In Vinica. Excuse me. I'm just looking for my glasses. I'm an old lady, and all of a sudden, I don't know what I did with them, but that's okay. I'll survive. Anyway, let's say that again. I was born in Vinica, December 7th, 1942. Vinica was a city in Ukraine about 160 miles from the capital, Kyiv. If any of the students have been listening to the news and what's happening in the world, what's happening to Ukrainians right now. Kyiv is the capital of Ukraine. It's beautiful. Well, now it doesn't look that beautiful. Some of you know why. Putin has made sure that it would be torn apart, bombed. It used to be a vibrant, beautiful city by the river. Soviet occupations of our land and the determination, destruction of its people over many years. Thank you, sweetie. It changed, and though they were very well known to survive against terrible odds. As World War II progressed, combat between the Soviets and the German armies became more and more part of the daily city life. When the Soviet army was beaten back, the invading German army took its place. There was a substantial Jewish population in my hometown, but by the end of the war, it was decimated because the Nazis continued the Soviet plan of annihilating Jews and their culture. So if you were a Jew, then your life was in worse danger than if you were a Christian. Jews were routinely rounded up and no one ever heard from them again. Sounds horrible and scary, and it was. My family was Christian. We still are. And one of the Christian values we believed in deeply was to help each other, no matter what religion you were, because we are all God's children. I'm sure you will all agree with me. As time went by, our day-to-day lives became harder and harder, but we did our best to live in peace with those around us. Luckily, we were spared the worst of the Great Terror for now. Ukraine right now, the president of Ukraine is half Ukrainian by birth and half Jewish. And we all got along very, very well until Putin stuck his nose into our lives. And as you know, things have changed tremendously. Anyway, our peace was shattered when Masha came running to our home crying out for help. My father, Ivan, and in English, Ivan, the name means John, but Ivan is his name. My father, Ivan, quickly opened the door to let her in. But where could they hide my mother's best friend? Nina and Masha had a strong bond since childhood. And again, they played together, went to school together, braided each other's long, beautiful hair, and did everything together. The two of them were like sisters who would do anything for each other. Now, Masha's life was in danger, and so was her family. What could be done? Where was a good hiding place when you have only 3 little rooms? Where would the German soldiers not look? Would anybody like to guess? Yes, sweetie. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
An attic.
The attic?
Where did she say?
Attic.
Attic. That sounds like a good place. Yeah, I might have picked that place. But my daddy didn't. I don't know if they even had an attic at this home. It was a little house. It only had, well, they only had 3 little rooms. Where would the German soldiers not look? Hard to figure it out. And they didn't have much time. They had to hide her quickly. What to do? My parents knew what they had to do. Of course they would help Masha. Of course they would save her life, even if their act of bravery would cost them their own lives. My parents had to think quickly. There was only one place they felt would be a good, safe hiding place for their friend. Interesting. I can't wait to find out what place it is. Oh, in the meantime, at that time I was 2.5 years old. I had no idea what was going on. I was playing on the floor with a few little toys that I had as my parents are trying desperately to find a good hiding place for Masha. In their kitchen, they quickly shoveled aside the table and the little round rug that was underneath. Beneath the rug was a small wooden trapdoor that led to the root cellar. This is where my parents stored their cabbage, potatoes, onions for the winter. They quickly hid Masha, it's not Marsha, I'm just saying it in English now, it's Masha, under the potatoes. closed the cellar door, threw the rug back on top, and moved the table back over the rug just in time, for immediately they heard a violent pounding on their front door and the loud voice of a German soldier. "Are you hiding any Jews?" he yelled with venom. It felt as if their hearts stopped beating from fright, as my parents denied any knowledge of hiding Jews. They soon learned a severe lesson. Never, and remember this, boys and girls, never underestimate your enemies. Within minutes, the soldiers found the hiding place, and they dragged Masha, wide-eyed and hysterical by her beautiful hair, to the truck where others terrified Jews they had rounded up that night. We never saw her or the rest of her family again. And when she was down below, the Nazis grabbed her head and her hair, pulled it up, and then they dragged her all the way from the house to their truck that they were gathering all the Jews. Can you imagine the pain? Any of you little girls have any idea how that had to hurt? I've never had that done to me, but I can imagine how much that had to hurt. Where did they take these people? They took them to Auschwitz. That nearly every captive from our region was sent there. It was there that at many other camps that millions of innocent people perished. It was there that the evil thrived in an orderly fashion. It was there that unholy darkness consumed humanity. The German soldiers treated the prisoners like animals, but the soldiers themselves were the real animals. My parents and I were spared from being sent to Auschwitz. Why? Why were we not taken? We tried to save a Jew. We deserved to die. What miracle saved us from the horrors of the concentration camp? Any idea how that happened, that we were not killed? It was anyone who helped any Jew or was hiding any Jewish person. And if the Nazis found out, they would come and get you, and you too would be taken. When they brought the people to Auschwitz, they told them that they wanted them to take off all their clothes and leave them by the side of this great big room, something like this. I don't want you to do that, don't worry. Anyway, they told them that they were going to turn on nice warm water and everybody would have a nice shower. It sounded wonderful for these poor people, haven't had a shower for so long they couldn't even remember the last time they had one. Well, they did what they were told, and the soldiers surrounded them. They left their clothing, their watches, anything they had, their wedding rings, you name it, and stepped forward, and they knew that any second the warm water would come at them. But it wasn't warm water that came at them. It was something so awful and so horrible. It was poisonous gas that the soldiers had that turned on. And before you knew it, the people were coughing and falling and dying. And anyway, that's what happened to them. And we were wondering why they did not take us. My parents and I were spared because the Nazis could use the skills my parents had. The Nazis were thorough and knew everything about everyone in our area. They knew that my father spoke, before he learned English, 6 languages. Not only did he learn how to speak them, he could read and write in them, and he very accurately. Anyway, they knew that my father spoke 6 languages fluently, so the Germans could use him as a translator. Do you think my father wanted to be their translator? No way, but there was no choice. He knew if he didn't do that job, the Germans would kill my mother and myself and him. He didn't worry about himself, but he surely did not want my mother and his little girl to die. So anyway, my mother was well known as an excellent seamstress. The Germans could use her to sew uniforms for the German army. Because boys and girls, just because a lady can sew on a button doesn't mean she can sew a German uniform. As much as I hated the German army, I have to admit that when I've seen them on television in their uniforms, they were very, very nice uniforms. They weren't sloppy, they weren't dirty, they were pressed, they were very nice. Anyway, our lives were spared to be used as slaves for the right. So, so we were sent to a slave labor camp in Germany. Now my mother, she was extremely talented seamstress. A bride could come to her on a Friday and say, please, Nina, could you please make me a beautiful wedding gown by Sunday? Sure. And in those days, ladies did not have any patterns how to sew a dress. There was no such thing even invented. But my mother could make a beautiful wedding gown. The young man would come and he'd say, Nina, my bride is getting her wedding gown dress made here. Could you please make me a nice tuxedo? Sure, my mother could do that, and she did. Anyway, early one Thursday morning, we were led to the train station not far from home. There we saw a mob of bewildered people, most with little suitcases or a bag containing some of their precious belongings. Children were clutching their parents. Many were crying. They were scared. They were little children. They didn't know what this was all about. And they see these big guys with rifles, parading around right about them. Many were crying. Their parents tried as best as they could to calm the children's fears, but you could see that they were just as scared. The doors of the freight cars were open, and we were packed into them like cattle, body to body. And at one time, those freight cars were used to transform cattle from one town to another. In the freight cars, there were no windows to look out or to breathe in fresh air. No food or water was provided. For a toilet, we had to use a tin can that was placed in the corner. After several days on the road to Germany, many of the weak, the elderly, and the little children died of thirst and hunger, and the awful foul stench of body sweat, excrements, urine, and death was overwhelming. Many people died from starvation. It was so very, very bad. I was very young when I arrived at the labor camp, and I do not remember much about the age. I was the age of 3, but there are events I experienced that I do remember vividly. To this day, I remember them because of their intensity. The accuracy was confirmed by my family years later. In truth, it was very difficult, usually impossible, for my parents to talk about their wartime experiences because they were so shattered by them. It took a determined effort to just forget the names of places they wish they never knew in the first place. They refused to tell me the name of the camp where we were imprisoned. It was just one more reminder of the torture they went through. Thankfully, they were able to let go of enough to keep them going forward with their lives. Many people have said to me, well, where were you exactly in Germany? Well, I'm sorry, I can't tell you, I don't know. They look at me like I'm some kind of an idiot. You don't know where you were? No, I was just a child, a 3-year-old. I was actually 2 and a half when we arrived, but I was a 3-year-old there. And my parents would not tell me because they were afraid that I would have nightmares of this place. They didn't want me to ever remember these things, so I never learned some of these names. My world was filled with fear, misery, pain, death, and hunger. Always hunger. And it wasn't just me. So I'm not saying, oh, poor little old me. No. All the children went through this, and most of the people. What little food we were given was so meager in substance that people around me were dying of starvation every day. The soup, was like more than flavored water, but even tasteless food is welcome when you are starving. If we were lucky enough to get some bread, it was hard and stale. We called it German bread. It was dark, it was very hard and stale, and I bet you don't know what we called eventually when we were in America, American bread. We called it cotton bread. We never had bread that soft and it felt like cotton. So anyway, there's just so much abuse a human body can tolerate before it is destroyed, and far too many were. When my family arrived at the camp, we were strong and healthy, as were most of the rest of the people. When we were finally liberated 2 years later, those that were still alive were walking skeletons. And I'm not kidding you, and I don't say this as a joke. They really did look, they were skeletons. When you arrived at a Nazi slave labor camp, the civilian prisoners are immediately separated. Men are lodged in separate barracks from the wives and children. The barracks were built to hold 20 people. But guess what? At least 40 people are placed into each one, whether it was a men's barracks, all men, or the ladies. Can you imagine how crowded that had to be? The place is built for 20, but 40 are going to be living there. Okay. Some bunk-like beds had mattresses. They were stained, smelly, and full of insects. Oh, I can just feel them crawling on me. If a blanket is there, it is of no better shape than the mattress. You are crammed into these shelters without any dignity or privacy. There are no inside toilets, water, or showers. The whole camp is surrounded by the high wood and wire fence, with barbed wire crowning the very top. Armed guards and guard dogs patrol the perimeter, so you can't even get out of there no matter how much you'd want to. This is a place of misery. During the hot summer months, you try to get near the walls to get some cool air through the cracks of the plyboards. And I remember this, even I was so little, how we'd get to the walls and try to breathe in some air from the cracks. Anyway, in winter, you didn't do that. In winter, you huddled together usually with your mother or older sister to share what body heat you had, or you would surely freeze. Sleep is frequently fitful, but at least while asleep, you could try to escape your reality. Imagine a dark, let's see if you can do this in your mind. Imagine a dark, foreboding room, stuffed full of scared, hungry, sick, exhausted people. The stagnant air reeks of human stench, the place of misery indeed. When we first arrived at the camp, my family was taken to a separate building away from other prisoners. We had no idea why. Everybody got to go to a dorm, or ladies here, men here, children here, and so forth, but not us. Do you think we were a little bit afraid? How many raised your hand, or do you think we were a lot afraid? Yeah. We were a lot afraid. We had no idea what they were going to do to us. Anyway, here my father was tested to see if he would be a suitable translator. He was placed in a room where a number of German officers sat around him watching as he translated a memo from Romanian into German. Now, Romanian language and German are very different, so it wasn't something easy that these languages, in fact, I'll tell you all the languages that he did speak. Obviously Ukrainian, he was born as a Ukrainian and was a Ukrainian to his end. Polish, Czechoslovakian. Polish and Czechoslovakian and Ukrainian are Slavic languages, and they have some similarities. Some words are very similar to Ukrainian. So that was easier for my dad to learn, to pick it up. Anyway, he also learned German. So let's see, Ukrainian, Polish, Czechoslovakian, Romanian. Let's see, what did I say after Romanian? There was German. Thank you. You have better memory than I do. German, and I think that was and the seventh language that he learned, he had to come to America. What language could he learn here? English. Any help from student?
English.
Yes. What? Did she say English? You are correct. You get an A from me. I once was a teacher. Yes. And my father was very eager to learn English too. So, and he not only learned how to speak all these languages, he learned how to read in them, which is very important, boys and girls, and how to write in them. And so he was a very happy man when he would meet people of those languages and he could talk with them. And that person would just light up like, you know English, or you know Czechoslovakian or Polish? Oh my goodness. They were very happy to meet someone who knew their language. In the memo, it stated that on such and such a date, That's a memo that my father's translating to them from Romanian to German language. A German train carrying ammunition would cross over a special bridge in Romania. Romanian patriots would be waiting for it. They would place dynamite under the bridge, and at 3 o'clock the train would be blown up by the Romanian underground. Oh. Anyway, when my father completed the translation, everyone in the room turned and looked at an old man sitting in the corner to see if he approved of the translation. All looked way over there. And Mom and Dad didn't know what was going on. Anyway, they looked at him and he approved of the translation and he nodded. What does this mean, boys and girls? Yes, right? Yes, he approved. If my father had not translated the memo exactly as written with the correct date, time, and place, as well as information about the dynamite plan, my father and mother and I would have been immediately executed, and I would not be standing here in front of you. This we were told after Father passed their test. Again, never underestimate your enemies. Never think that they are stupid and that you can outwit them. Doesn't happen, boys and girls. When my father was not used as a translator, he was put to work in the ammunition and rifle factory building in the camp. He had no choice. It killed Father's heart to be making things that would help the German war machine. Strict discipline was the way of the camp life, and your survival depended on total submission and obedience. Little children played in the mud, knew that if a guard told them to come, they were to obey immediately. If they refused to come, they got a hard slap across the face or a swift kick in the side. I was a little girl who was playing with the little children in the mud. We had no toys, we had nothing else. And I did not understand a word of German. I didn't speak it, I never heard it before until we were in this camp. Anyway, one day I was playing and a soldier came by and he was a very, very tall man, or he seemed extremely tall to me. And on this shoulder, he had a long rifle, and right here at his hip, he had a knife, a long, thin knife. He said something to me, "Schnell, come and see here." I was terrified, I froze, I was scared of him to begin with, but I had no idea what he said. Maybe somebody here is German and could interpret this to the children. Any idea what it meant? Yes.
Hurry up, come here.
Exactly. And he meant, hurry up, get over here. I had no idea. I froze. I was terrified. Sure enough, the guy came over to me, started talking some more German. Again, I didn't know what he was saying. And instead of slapping me in the face, he took out that knife, the blade that he had, right on the side, and he went wham. And to this day, honestly, right here, I have a nice long white scar. That's where that knife went into me. Blood was squirting everywhere. And he still was saying some things. I don't know what he said, but I was just shaking. I was so scared. He finally left, and a lady who was also, how do I say it, a person that was put in this Nazi slave labor camp. She could speak German and understood it, and as she was walking, she heard the whole conversation that he had at me. And he was screaming at me, "How dare I? I shamed him. I dishonored him because I didn't come right away to him. I didn't, acknowledge him. But I had no idea. I did not know a word of German. If I spoke to you in Ukrainian, minus my family, so don't raise your hand. If anybody here knows what I'm saying, raise your hand. Ви є дуже гарні діти, і я всіх люблю. Does somebody here know what I said? Have any idea what I said? Okay, I will tell you. I said you are all very nice children, and I can't remember.
And I love you very much.
And I love you very much, yes. But that's not what he said to me. Oh no, he told me every name that he could think of. So anyway, after that, The women, they worked from early morning until past sunset. Some worked in the kitchen cooking meals for the Germans. Imagine having to cook all this wonderful food for every day for your captors, smelling the aroma and knowing you could not eat any of it. You also knew that your poor child is starving to death a short distance away, and you were forbidden to take any of this precious food to save your own child's life. The soldiers had good, healthy meals, and the woman who cooked for them would sometimes hide a potato or a piece of fresh bread in their clothing in an effort to smuggle some food for their starving children. Again, the Nazi guards were not stupid. They knew where to search, and when they found hidden food on the women, the soldiers would have their way with them. They were as vicious as they wanted to be, and no one could come to the women's rescue. Other women worked from dawn to after dusk, sewing Nazi uniforms with no rest or meal breaks. This was my mother. She was sewing with the other ladies. Finally, at the end of the day, they were given a cup of watered-down soup and a piece of very dry, hard bread. Picture this if you've gotten it. The men, too, were working hard, either in different factories or outside digging graves to bury prisoners who were killed or died of hunger, overwork, or disease. Death from lack of food, properly cared, and shelter were joined by another trick of the Nazi trade. Death also came in the form of bullets. Veteran slave workers at the farm factory warned newcomers to resist the temptation to make anything defective and not to jam the rifles. The Germans were smart. They would spot check the rifles and ammunition, and if they found something defective, they would exact swift and deadly retribution. I don't know if you quite understood this, boys and girls, but they told the men, including my father, who had to work in the factory, don't you dare touch anything there. If you take the rifle and you jam it, or the gun, or whatever you do, we will find out, and you will pay for this dearly. So the men were very careful, but something would happen. Sometimes new people were put in with them, and the new people hated the Nazis just as much as we all did at that time. And they would say, I'm going to break that rifle in half, or I'm going to do this or this. And my father and the other men pleaded with them, please don't do it. We will have to be punished for all of that. Well, they didn't care. Okay. One other time, the Nazis had learned that there were some Jews living in Poland, and so they were going after them. The nice people in Poland heard that the Nazis were coming and they were going to grab the Jewish people. So the Polish teenagers, like from 14 to 17 or so, went into the woods. They wanted to find the Nazis and kill them and get rid of them, and so that they would be all left in peace. Well, boys and girls, it didn't work out that way. The boys meant well, but they were, after all, still teenagers, didn't have the experience that the Nazis had. The Nazis got all the boys and they brought them back to Germany, to the concentration camp. When they came there, they saw all these rifles and said, oh boy, we're gonna break every one of them, or we're gonna jam them. And the men said, boys, listen, please don't do this. You have no idea. It means death for most of us if you do this. Well, teenagers being teenagers, I found out, they don't listen to you. They know it all. They know better than the elders, of course. Everybody knows that. They weren't going to listen to these people who were telling them what they can do and not do. And so, sure enough, they did what they shouldn't have done. And the Nazis came in and they discovered that the rifles were jammed. Oh my gosh. So all of a sudden, I have a group of young men here that said they would help me. Would that row please stand up? I will be very grateful to you. All of you, please, in this row. I think there's 10 of you. And would you please help out, because that's not enough. And you look like nice, strong men. So please, would you also stand up? Okay, we'll pretend I'm a Nazi, God forbid. But anyway, the Nazis had all the men in a line. And then as each man went out the door, just before they went out the door into the public area, they had to say a number that followed. Okay, well, we'll have a countdown. Will you please be? 1. Okay. Say it louder so they can hear, because they don't know what I'm doing.
1,
1,
2, 3,
4,
5.
1, 1,
1, 2, 3, 4, 1,
5.
5.
1,
2, 3, 4, 5.
1. Okay, the men would have the countdown. In the meantime, we all heard this horrendous whistle blowing. Just stand for just a minute more yet. And we dropped everything. The mothers, the children, we all ran to the factory. We knew what was going to happen. The mothers were already crying and praying to God, please, dear Lord, don't let it be my brother or my son or my father or my husband. Please, dear Lord, spare him. And then they had the countdown, and now they said, everyone sit down but number 2. Anyone who's a 2 must stand. So please, 1. Okay, if you are a number, I think there's got to be more 2s. Oh, cheating. Oh, you don't cheat on me. Okay, 1, 2. Let's see. 1, 2.
Yeah, you're a 2.
I'm a 3.
1,
I was
2.
4.
So who's ever a 2 is standing. They're all standing.
Okay.
All your 2s are
And
standing.
here you're 2 also, you're standing. Have you noticed something, dear friends and parents, that the younger students have been much more obedient and doing everything right? The closer to being a teenager, they know it all. That proved it, you see? Thank
All
you.
your 2s are standing.
Yes, and then what would happen?
If he's a 5, I'm a 1.
Oh, I don't know anymore. It was
Just remain standing.
1 is 2.
yeah, I think you got it.
It's okay.
Yeah. Okay. And now the hard part came. All the 2s, because that's the number that was called. Tomorrow it might be a 5. It might be a 4. You never know what number they're going to call. All the 2s had to step out. And oh my gosh, this is the hard part. Even for me to say it is hard. The Nazi guy would go bang, bang, bang. And they always aimed for the head. I could never understand why until I got older. By hitting, maybe I shouldn't even say this, I don't know. But by hitting the person in the head, they knew they would get them. And they would only have to use 1 bullet. And so they did this every time that the people disobeyed them. You may now sit down. You did a very nice job, and I thank you. But that wasn't so hard, was it? I think that my time is up.
You know, you're good. You're still good.
Oh, it's okay? All right. Otherwise, somebody will go bang to me. My time's up. Right? Anyway,
You have 10 more minutes.
the life in the slave labor camp was a marathon of endurance and a profound struggle to keep hope alive. Fear of the unknown and terror of the known filled each of our days. It felt as if nothing could defeat the evil that surrounded us, but there was one small ray of brightness. There was something the Nazi guards were scared of. Anybody have an idea what would scare the Nazi soldiers? And they were really scared of this. I'll give you a clue. It's a sickness. Something has it, that there's a sickness, and if it spread there, they were terrified. Okay? It was. Right. There was something the Nazi guards were scared of, and that was a dreaded disease, tuberculosis. Your children, you probably have no idea what tuberculosis is, but I think your teachers and parents would know. When someone in the barracks contacted tuberculosis, then most everyone else inside got infected as well. It's a disease that just spreads. It's a dangerous disease. Anyone who contacted TB or was living in a TB-infected building was not allowed to work. They were quarantined and allowed to rest. Now, the soldiers were terrified. They would not come into your dorm anymore, which they used to love to come in the middle of the night, grab somebody, beat them up if they wanted to, or kiss them or do whatever they wanted, and got away with it. But you wouldn't do that to a person who has tuberculosis because you too would get it and you would die. They didn't want to die, obviously. So anyway, my mother and I both contracted TB. We nearly died. We knew the war would end someday. All we had to do was try to stay alive just a little longer. Many people with TB died in the camps for lack of medicine, food, and proper care. But something inside us kept us alive. We were meant to live, my mother and I. God had a plan for us, and we had to survive to accomplish it. We had a very strong will. We were going to live. We were going to overcome this. In the spring of 1945, British soldiers liberated our camp. Our agonizing, brutal ordeal was finally over. From the brink of death, we finally saw life again. Never had we been so overcome with joy. All we could do was weep with gratitude for our liberators. Several of us who had TB but were still well enough to travel were taken to a sanatorium for TB patients. The sanatorium was located near the Black Forest. If anybody has ever traveled to Germany, and if you went to the Black Forest, you know what I'm talking about. The scent of the Black Forest was unbelievable. It was so wonderful. Anyway, this sanatorium was located near the Black Forest. I was in the sanatorium for 1 year and mother for 2. And though I was cured of TB, I never fully had good health again. Throughout the rest of my life, I have battled one serious health scare after another, but life and faith do endure. While we were recuperating in the sanatorium, my father was taken to a displaced persons camp in Munster, Germany. Once I recovered from TB and was released from the sanatorium, I was placed in a nearby orphanage run by Lithuanian nuns. That was the other language that I forgot to mention my father knew. From time to time, my father was able to get a pass from his camp and go by train to visit me. We would always see my mother on these trips. One of my favorite memories was when my father would take me by the hand and we would walk through the enchanting Black Forest. It had the most wonderful, intoxicating scent. I never forgot it, and it's true, I never did. And once I got to smell it, believe it or not, in America. It was unbelievable. My mother finally recovered from TB, and even though we were still severely underweight, Mother and I had regained enough overall health to be reunited with my father. Now that we were a family again, we could begin a new chapter of our life, this time in a displaced person camp. The year was 1947. Where could I have smelled the Black Forest scent here in America? I don't know if any of you have ever been there. Maybe, I think some adults might have. Have you ever heard of the Biltmore Estate in North Carolina?
Yeah.
Yeah, and they, trees were brought in from the Black Forest and planted by the beautiful Biltmore, is that how you
Biltmore.
Biltmore, thank you. Biltmore Estate. And when my husband and I, this was years later, we were married and we went on a vacation and we stopped there. And I said to my husband, Andy, oh my God, this smells like the Black Forest. He said, honey, you're imagining it. I said, no, dear, really, just take a sniff. Well, he kind of, downplayed and didn't do it. When we walked to the Biltmore Estate, the man who was waiting for all the tourists to come, and he was going to take us on a tour around the Biltmore Estate, he told us about it. And then he said, Mr. Biltmore wanted this to be just like it was in Germany or in Europe, as close as he could get it to be like that. So he had the trees from the Black Forest imported and planted here. And I looked at Andy and he looked at me, and we both knew that that was why I could smell that wonderful scent of the Black Forest. Anyway, I think my time is up.
You've got 5 minutes.
Oh, I do have 5 more minutes? Okay. Anyway,
We'll let you know when your time is up. 5 minutes.
my mother finally recovered from TB, and even though we were still severely underweight, Mother and I had regained enough overall health to be reunited with my father. Now that we were a family again, we could begin a new chapter of our life, this time in the displaced person camp, and the year was 1947. A displaced person camp is a camp where refugees of World War II were lodged until they either were sent back to the country of their origin, or if they were very lucky, had a sponsor that would accept responsibility for them. If you had a qualified sponsor, then you were allowed to immigrate to your sponsor's country. If you had a marketable skill and were healthy, these camps were run by the Allies and offered far better living conditions than the labor camp. Labor camp of the Nazis. Anyway, we were very lucky that Mom and I and Daddy all passed the tests. We no longer had tuberculosis, and so we came and they took us out of the camp, and we were located in the town of Munster, Germany. Our DP camp was located in Munster, Germany. The barracks in the camp were large, clean, well-made, and divided into private rooms. Each family was given one room of their own to live in. We had one small bed and blanket for the three of us. I slept near the wall, my mother next to me, my father was next to her. We were all very thin, so we occupied the one bed very snugly. Our building did not have any indoor toilets or shower facilities. To relieve ourselves, we went outside our building to the lavatories that were set up for the camp residents' use. Since there was a curfew, if we had to go late at night, we would use a linen can in our room, and every morning my father and other fathers would dump the contents into the outside toilet. Showers were offered to the camp residents once a week. This was such a luxury, as in the 2 years we were in the Nazi camp, we never had showers or had any other way of getting clean. In the DP camp, every Friday night, all the men and boys would take their weekly showers in a large communal shower room. On Saturday night, all the females would take their turn. You can't imagine how glorious it felt to finally be clean. So remember, when Mama says, hey, you got to take your shower, we're going to church tomorrow, don't complain. That would be a big, big sin. Anyway, you will smell nicely, and if you're a boy, you might attract a cute girl, and if you're a girl, you might attract some cute guys. So it's important to take your showers. Anyway, there was also, for the first time, I was also able to go to school. I realized very early on that having an education is one of the most important things in life. Did you know that, boys and girls? Knowledge opened up the world to you, and nothing was impossible. A bright, positive future awaited me. I eagerly walked to school, carrying my book, pencil, and paper, thirsty for the next lesson. I remember one cold winter day especially well. It was extremely cold, children, that day. I remember it too. To this day, I arrived to class, and our teacher had great news for all of us. The Red Cross has sent us some shoes. This was something very new and special for us. In the past, we did receive packages, a little long, sharp-shaped box with pencils, a small paper pad, a handkerchief, but never shoes. Teachers said that if the shoes fit us, we could keep them. If not, then they would be given to the next child. So she had us make 2 lines, boys on the left side, girls on the right side. Boys tried on boys' shoes, obviously girls tried on girls' shoes. Let's see. The teacher said if the shoes fit us, we could keep them. If not, then they would be given to the next child behind us. Oh gosh, how I wanted those shoes, for this was winter, and my feet were so cold. As I tried on my precious new shoes, I realized that they were not my size. They pinched my toes. No, what to do? If I told my teacher, then she would take them away from me and let the next child try them on. I may never get a pair of real shoes ever, ever again. I would have to wear that awful cardboard on my feet forever. So for the first time, I did something terrible. I told a lie. My parents always told me that lying was a sin, but I needed those shoes. Oh yes, they fit me very well, I said desperately. The shoes were mine. Many years later, I wonder about the child that did not receive any shoes because of my lie. And it even happened when I was here in America. doing something in my bedroom, and I saw those shoes, and I remembered that incident so well, and I felt so awful, thinking, that poor little girl didn't get any shoes because I lied. It didn't feel good to lie. It never does. Anyway, the, that July I was very excited when I was told to go to the soup line where we were to receive some cherries. A local German farmer had an enormous crop that summer and brought them to the camp to share with us. I had never seen or tasted cherries in my life. My mother told me that my grandpa had a cherry orchard in Ukraine. She said the cherries tasted sweet and juicy. I was so excited I could not wait to try them. Mother let me go down to the kitchen with my soup bowl. I ran as fast as I could, but when I arrived there, the line was already long. I had to wait an eternity for my turn. I saw our neighbors leaving the kitchen area carrying their bowls filled to the top with the bright red cherries. Finally, it was my turn. As I reached the window of the kitchen, the lady asked me how many, meaning how many people in my immediate family. I said 3. She took my bowl and gave me one handful. I was shocked. Why so few cherries when others got so many more? Then I was told that some had as many as 9 or 10 in a family all living together. We only had 3. So that's not the end of the cherries. As I turned to go, the sun shone brightly into my eyes, blinding me for a moment, and I stumbled on the dirt road. My bowl of beautiful cherries spilled to the ground. Out of nowhere, a little girl quickly snatched a handful and stuffed the cherries, dirt and all, into her mouth. I could not believe my eyes. They were my cherries. I screamed at her to give them back to me as I tried to pry open her little mouth. Some adults surrounded us and pulled me away while I sobbed that she had taken my cherries. You saw it. She's taken my cherries. The kind adults took me back to the kitchen, washed my hands and tear-stained face, and got me more cherries from my bowl. It's hard for someone who has never truly gone hungry to understand how badly I behaved and why. When I see people going hungry, I always try to help them out, for I cannot forget my own days of true starvation long ago. And it's true, if I see someone holding a sign that they're homeless or they're hungry, I have to help them. My time is up. I'm sorry, I enjoyed this. I don't know about you.
Finish your story and then end it.
Well, let's see.
About the cherries, yeah.
You got more cherries.
Anyway, once I was at McDonald's. I was going to get a hamburger, and I saw a little old gentleman. He just seemed so alone and so hungry, and so I went and I told the lady that I wanted a hamburger, but I also wanted another hamburger for the gentleman behind several people behind me, and I paid for both of us. Finally, the little gentleman went up, and the lady handed him the hamburger, and he said, "Oh, no, ma'am, I don't have any money. I can't afford it. I'm sorry that I came up here. I just wanted to take a deep smell of it. I love the smell of hamburgers." And then the lady told him that I paid for him. And he said, "Ma'am," to me, "I can never repay you. I don't have any money." And I told him, "I didn't do it for money. I did it because I wanted company. And you look like the kind of gentleman that would be a great companion." So we sat together and enjoyed our hamburger, and it was the best day of my life. If you do a kindness, you will feel it. I have always said I always want to be known as a giver, not a taker. And I've tried very hard to be that way. So my own family knows I'm always giving cakes or cookies to our neighbors. Anyway, thank you so very, very much.